Mike Detillier, good day, sir. Welcome into the game in T-Town.
I'm doing fine. Thank you, Ryan.
Mike, when you look at the SEC just announcing about 15 minutes ago, I think most of us knew that it was coming, but today the SEC announced that all regular season conference games and non-conference competitions are canceled for the 2019-2020 athletic year, including all remaining SEC championship events, pro days, none of that. No postponed, no delayed, canceled. They're done. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, we could see the tsunami coming with this, and I really feel bad for the guys. I just hope the NCAA does the right thing and would give those seniors an opportunity to come back and play. But we'll just have to see how this works, Ryan. We walking on ground here that we've not walked on before, as far as and dealing with different things, as far as what the virus is bringing to the table here. And, we're at a hot spot here where I live, so to speak, because we just had Mardi Gras a few years back, and I think it certainly has become sort of the lightning flame for a lot of different things involved with it. But you feel bad for the athletes, the coaches who have worked and trained, but, that's a bigger thing going on. And so, eventually in your life, you're going to have to make a sacrifice for something, and this is sort of the sacrifice, those young athletes are going to have to make. But I think the NCAA has got to do right and give them an opportunity to come back and work out that senior season if they desire to do so.
Mike, you've worked in the medical field. There's always this side of overreacting and underreacting. If you overreact, there's consequences. If you underreact, there's consequences. I think there's a healthy balance between the two. Judging the way that this environment and what's happening, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing the right thing? Is these the correct actions?
I think it is. So, Ryan, just a little bit more information, because I do work for one of the healthcare centers here in one of the hospitals in the area. Just from all the information we've been able to gather and how this spreads and how this is sort of just the tip of the iceberg of what we're going to see, because it's going to get worse before it gets better. Let's not stick our heads in the sand, and this isn't a hoax or it isn't made up. This is real life. I mean, there have been people, one individual who drove an Uber. He was an Uber driver here in our area, and I haven't seen him lately, but, he was a guy, wherever you wanted to go, he would drive you. He lost his life to that virus. 57 years old. So,
wow.
You can talk and say, well, it didn't affect me. Well, maybe it doesn't, but it has affected other families, and it's affecting livelihoods and everything else. So, I think part of the healthcare profession is to overreact at first, and then you adjust. And I think that's just the way it's going to be. And I think that we're down that path to try to be as prudent as you can, and we understand how it's transmitted, and just do the very best you can to prevent it. But it's something that, and it's just not the flu, okay? If anybody tells you that, they plumb don't know what they're talking about. Just absolutely don't. We've had people that have had it and tell you it's a lot worse than that. So, again, you're dealing with, and the worst thing is a lot of social media stuff. People who all of a sudden become experts at what they're talking about. And we've heard from a lot of different experts in the medical field talk about it, and it is something very serious. And is there an overreaction at first? Maybe so. But then, if so, then you could adjust. But, Ryan, I think we're just kind of getting the tip of the iceberg of what could happen down the road. And it is going to get worse before it gets better. And this is something that's going to pass us. But, again, it's something you have to take very serious and understand the consequences could be your life or somebody you love's life. So be smart about it.
Mike, you're a friend of mine. You've been on this show for several years, and I'm going to bounce something off of you because I need your true insight. I feel guilty for talking about sports, but I almost feel like an obligation to be a distraction. I want to educate and inform, but I think sports serves that outlet to get minds off of this. It's hard to do when you're opening up your show and 2 minutes later you're covering a news story that involves the SEC canceling everything. So even as of today, I'm writing out my show. I had no clue that this was coming down at 2 o'clock, and you've got to almost break news as it goes. What would you do? How would you do? How do you handle it?
I would do exactly what you do, and that's what we do. We, our station has decided on-air talent. We do shows from the house.
Okay.
And, I had a studio sort of set up for me at my home a few years back. And so we all have to adjust in life. It's part of living. I'll never forget, years back, the guy that used to own the Saints was John Meekum Jr. His dad, senior, at that point was one of the richest men in the world. He was an oil tycoon. He was a guy that, he was one of these wildcatters out in West Texas. He wasn't born with it like that. He earned his money. Pops, he earned it. And as a kid, I heard him say, the biggest thing in life you have to learn is to adjust. And also, too, is there comes a time when there has to be a little bit away from the norm. And I'll always remember that, him saying that. And we're a little bit away from the norm now. And I think that's what sports talk does, gives you an opportunity, for some people to vent. And it doesn't make a difference to me if you agree or disagree. And just say, kind of what's on your mind, but be smart about it and understand, this is about something a lot bigger than sports at the moment. But sports does give you that outlet, does give you that outlet. Many years ago, we did stuff after 9/11. I remember Buddy Diliberto, who I worked with for so many years, saying, hey, listen, this is the outlet for people because they're scared today. They're scared this could happen to another big city. So let's make it fun for them.
So, Michael,
and so you try to do it as well as you can.
All right.
And with NFL free agency, the one thing the NFL did right, they let it run. They let this run, and it's given us that outlet.
Tom Brady officially announcing that he will no longer be a Patriot. Your thoughts?
Didn't surprise me. People have heard me on Sports Talk and at WWL for a long time. I've heard me say I did not think Brady would play for the Patriots this year. Now, again, one of the sources that I had, and it's peculiar, but they always got a Cajun somewhere in life walking around. But the personal photographer for Giselle, his wife, is actually a guy that grew up about 20 minutes from where I live, here on Bayou Lafourche. He went to Nicholls State University, did some independent stuff, and Tom's wife, Giselle, saw his work and called him up, what are you doing? He was an independent photographer, and he got hired. He follows the family all over the world, all over. And he told me and hinted pretty strongly back in September. He, he's a couple years older than my oldest daughter, but he won't call me Mike. It's always Mr. Mike to him. Though I try to break him of that, but he won't do it. And he called me up one day and he said, Mr. Mike, I'm telling you, he said, watching the last year of Tom Brady in New England. I said, why, he's going to retire? He said, nope. He said, I don't think he will, but he said, I think this is it. I think he'll move on. And, at first, I don't know, maybe somebody says something to you and maybe it's just the heat of the moment. Because, we always sometimes say things, sometimes, and it's the heat of the moment. And he repeated it to me again a couple weeks later when he came down here to visit his family. He lives in Old Metairie today, right a little outside of New Orleans. And he repeated it to me. He said, no, I'm telling you, it's like he's going to play somewhere else. It surprised me, Ryan. I really was. But, he tells me that twice, and I believe him. And sure enough, as it got closer and closer, I would text him about it, or he just finished doing the doggy show, that Westminster Dog Show. Man, a guy that grew up, he lived about 5 miles from the end of the world. And I'm talking about the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, that's how far he lived down in South Louisiana. And he's doing photography for Vanity Fair magazine. And he tells me, listen, I think it's it. He's going to go somewhere else. And so, we finally got it confirmed today. I've had a lot of people ask me about it, and he certainly put the bug in my ear that was going to happen. And I'm interested to see if this goes through, if he signs with Tampa Bay. And with a real intriguing guy to be his head coach in Bruce Arians. Ryan, you'd love him. Talk to him. I don't know if you've had him.
No, I have, because his connection with Coach Bryant.
Oh, my God. He got Bear Bryant's. He only coached 2 years there with the Bear. But you'd have swore it's 22 years. I mean, he got stories good. He was running backs coach at University of Alabama, and he was here in New Orleans. He coached with Coach Mora. And so when Coach Mora got fired, Rick Venturi took over, and he gave the offense over to Bruce. And Bruce got tight end reverses and all kinds of stuff he's putting in. And Rick's like, man, what the hell are you doing? He was like, no. He said, just let me do what I got to do. We're not going anywhere. And listen, they were pretty good at it. They scored some points with Bruce. But, man, I've gotten to know him pretty well over the last few years. You talk about a character. And you don't get that. I always wondered kind of why that didn't come across on TV. Maybe it just wasn't the right combination for him, but great stories, a guy who's a quarterback whisperer, and he does things one way, pedal to the metal. He loves to throw the deep ball, and he loves to sling it around. And, man, Brady would have Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard. They got to protect him. Man, that's a lot of weapons offensively. And Bruce is a great play caller, and I think he'd work well. And I think it's going to happen pretty soon, Ryan. I'll be honest with you. I think it'll happen pretty quickly. And so everything I've heard is that he's leaning in that direction pretty strongly. But you're talking about a combination with Tom Brady and his talent, still at his age, and the mastermind of Bruce Arians, who is really, you talking about one of the good guys in this business. He's it. Him and I, at draft time when he was out of it, we would exchange texts. And I wish I could tell you what he would tell me about some of the guys. And he most of the time was right, because he was always, send me that draft book and I'm going to tell you what I think. And, he wasn't shy about it. And so when they'd make a pick, and we on the air, and, you'd hear the pick, and, I'd give my comments about it, and he would text me his comments about it. He's, no, I don't want to go on the air. I don't want to go on the air. Well, we did get him a couple of times with Bobby J and I, and, man, he was something to hear. He was a great storyteller. Loved University of Alabama. That was the last place he coached before he became the head coach at Temple. And he tells us he hired my neighbor, Joe Clark, to come help his offense. Joe was a quarterback coach, wide receiver coach, and he hired Joe to coach offensive line. Joe had never coached offensive linemen before. And so both those guys together, and funniest story is, he said the second day he got a job in Temple, he parks his car, walks to the coach's room, and he gets robbed. It was tough times in Philly back then. So he gets robbed. He said, guy took about $28 from him. He said, I had a 20, a 5, and 3 ones. So he said, I just gave it to him, no hassle. Says a week later, he said, I'm walking back to the coach's facility, and they tell me, don't worry about it. We got security for you. No security nowhere. He said, a guy walks up to him, and he says, he was going to rob him again. He said, Coach, he says, hold your hand out. And so Coach Evans holds his hand out. He gives him back $20. He said, I hate to have taken your money. He said, but you ain't going to last here long at Temple. So he said, I'm going to give you your money back. He actually gave him 20 of the $28 he had robbed him of.
Mike Detillier, the big 870 WWL. Mike, I want to tie into the draft here for a couple of more minutes. And I know I don't have long with the conversation that we're having, but let me ask you about this. When you look at eliminating pro days, is the NFL looking at, do you think that they could move the NFL draft back? How do you think this will impact evaluations? And there's proper, there's training that it required to get to those evaluations. Those who have had pro days and participated in the NFL Combine, they're good. How does the NFL judge the talent and evaluate that talent?
Well, you're going to have to rely more on your scouts. And they did this many years ago. I have a friend of mine, he's up in his 80s now. But he was just telling me Friday, that, hey, I was a scout when they did the draft in late January. We didn't do any of this. But he says, two things really changed everything. And one was putting the NFL draft on television. He said it became a show. It's a show now. And by doing that, it pushed the draft back. And he said the second thing it did is now you got head coaches with the chalk in their hands. They got the final say. You got general managers that are money-related guys that say, I got the final say, but they're repeating what the head coach tells them. So this guy gets the coaches and assistants involved, and there's a good and a bad with it. During the fall season, that head coach and assistant coaches have not seen those guys play. They're watching it on film, and so what it helps is the guys that they have actually sort of watched and been around. The guys that have played in the major bowl games, the Senior Bowl, East-West Shrine, that sort of thing. The guys that it hurts is the small college kids, because these individual pro days and stuff that you could bring them in, that's when you got to find out about a lot of them. Now you don't have it anymore. So it helps the young men, and I was talking to Coach O about this yesterday. I think it really will help elevate the people from the Alabama, LSU, Florida, Ohio State, Michigan, those sort of powers, because you've seen them, and they've played in the major games. I think that's just human nature, that you're going to go with that because that's the last thing you have on your mind, and what you've seen at the Combine. So it's different, and you can do the draft without all this hoopla. Now, I'm surprised the NFL has not moved it back, because they love the show and the pageantry of bringing those young guys in. But as of now, it's still, sort of that April 23rd to 25th run. But I'm a little surprised they didn't bump that back a couple of weeks, at least 2 weeks. Maybe give the teams a little bit more time to look at the players, but it's going to be done differently, and it can be done because it was done like that for many, many years.
But, I mean, how much of an advantage is it for those that have already went through that pro day? Well,
then they got the advantage.
Sure.
There's no question about that. And, Ed and I were talking about that yesterday, that puts that guy, okay, if you got a guy with an injury, somebody that can't work out, and in particular, I was asking about Grant Delpit. Grant has not been able to work out because of the ankle injury he's had. So you got to go on tape.
So that's an advantage for some, a disadvantage for others.
And so that's just the way it is. And listen, no matter what, it's the last image you have of him as a player, and like it or not. And there are coaches I know the way the Saints do things. They have their scouting department, and their chief of college scouting put up a board. They give it to Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis. Sean and Mickey rearranged the board based off of team needs and would they consider the right fit players for them. So now, Sean's always told me, hey, Mike, I know the top 100 players pretty well. But, later in the draft, I got to rely on my scouts. You're going to have to rely on them a lot more now than you ever did because now you can't bring them in to take a look. And the other part of this, and it's been something that all NFL teams do, you have a guy that you think is a late-round pick player, and he's right on the board, late-round pick, priority free agent. I bring him in. I talk to him, let him meet the position coach, and see the facilities. Let's say he doesn't get picked. You got that connection with him. You don't have that today. Not going to be able to do it. So there's a little bit of adjustment going on, but I do think it favors the major colleges and the teams that have chumped out all these players throughout the years, like an Alabama, like a Clemson, Florida, Auburn, LSU, you name them, over maybe some of the middle-range schools. Just because you've seen them. Those pro coaches have watched those bowl games and championship games. And the guys that have played in the East-West Shrine and out Mobile in the Senior Bowl and at the Combine, the last image you have, last memory you have.
Mike Detillier, WWL 870. Mike, I appreciate you. I think we've done the goals of this show. I said educate, inform, and distract, and I think we've done all three in the last 20 minutes of our conversation. Mike, I appreciate you more than ever, man. I appreciate you providing some balance here in our lives on a Tuesday afternoon. In
Ryan, I'm going to give you a little nugget.
Sure.
I wanted to do it. I've had two NFL college scouting directors tell me that other than Jerry Jeudy on their board, Henry Ruggs is the number 2 guy for them.
Wow.
Not CeeDee Lamb. So, man, that's going to be interesting, that battle, because, with the Cardinals making that deal yesterday, I think it's taken wide receiver out of round 1 for them. They're going to go for a big lineman. And to me, Judy's, a cut above. But, man, it is close, and I mean razor close for me, with CeeDee Lamb and Henry Ruggs. And, I just wanted to confirm my deal, and two of them tell me, hey, Ruggs is 2 for us.
Going to be a lot of fun to see exactly how all this impacts and the conversation. I got a feeling what you do is going to help us provide that distraction of the NFL draft, because if there's one thing that we can have a little bit of, that may provide that little bit of sports communication. I mean, it's going to be the job that you do and others in your field are going to be counted on in the next month to provide a lot of content, Mike, and we appreciate you doing it here on the program.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you, Mike Detillier, helping us out, the big 870 WWL.